All right, let's look at Morgan Tsvangirai's legacy and the road ahead for his party, the MDC. We're joined by political analyst Professor David Moore from UJ. Thanks for being with us, Prof.
Thanks for asking, Francis.
I think some of those people were picking up on the fact that he wasn't buried in Heroes Acre, but he was given a state funeral. Do you think the president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, gave him his dues in death?
Yeah. And it's my understanding that the Tsvangirai family and the MDC didn't want Morgan Tsvangirai buried beside, the ZANU-PF bad guys, if you want to put it in their mind. And he wanted to be buried beside his first wife, Susan Tsvangirai. So the family seems to be very thankful to the state, to Mnangagwa, for covering the fees of moving the body and the funerals. And so the body was lying in state yesterday in Harare and then moved to the village near Buhera today where the funeral took place.
Some would say opposition hero. What do you think his legacy is?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of heroism involved, especially in the late 1980s and the 1990s, up until the time the MDC was formed. I mean, it was an amalgamation of trade union struggles, student struggles, social justice, church struggles, and came together in the party, the MDC, the Movement for Democratic Change, which challenged the Mugabe regime like no other. Perhaps some might say 2009, when after that incredible violence after the election of 2008, decimated the party, and they were kind of forced to enter the government of national unity. That might have been a little step away from the popular base. When you get into the government and the state, you lose some of those linkages. Some
and he thought he could change more from within, but how successful was that?
Well, there were a lot of good things that happened out of that moment in history, the GNU. But also, I think the MDC kind of got caught up in trying to govern as one should. But ZANU-PF took advantage of that space and really did, oil the election machine very carefully to 2013. It created some peace. And there were actually incredibly good programs that were developed in Parliament, in the parliamentary committees, health, that sort of thing. Even the mining industry was looked into very carefully. So there were some positive things going on. But at the same time, the base of the MDC was decimated through the process of deindustrialization in the previous decade. No more working class, no more unions, that strong base. Students kind of getting caught up in internal struggles, whether they should join the public dialogue for the new constitution, which was another good thing that came out of the government of national unity, that sort of thing. So I think there was something lost in that moment that is going to be very hard to recover.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, because they've never had that showing at the polls that they had in 2008. So now what is the state of the opposition in Zimbabwe going into the next elections?
Well, the 2013 election is still controversial. There's lots of debate among analysts about whether it was free and fair, and the million extra votes that were kind of put in there somehow. And, the electoral roll, the voters' roll, was never actually released until the day before the election. So there were still lots of problems. So maybe the MDC won that one too. A lot of people say they won every election, but of course the elections were stolen. But there was criticism of Morgan Tsvangirai that, look, 2013, well, you've had your chance. Why don't you retire and let the process of selecting a new leader come forth? And so now that there hasn't been a new leader elected through congresses, we're seeing some tussles. Now, some of those divisions arose even earlier, 2005, 2006, but most of them came up after 2013, and so you've got a couple of new parties and different leaders who went off into different spaces. Are they going to be able to come back together now when there's a real new moment? I mean, it's a new era, isn't it? Mugabe's gone through a soft coup. It's a new era here in South Africa. Zuma's gone. So can the MDC pull its act together again and really, develop a new challenge for ZANU-PF? That's the big question, I think.
So this is so interesting because at the time of change in Zimbabwe, we were speaking to the MDC and they were adamant that Morgan Tsvangirai was the face of the party, refusing to accept that he was gravely ill. So you've hinted at this. There's now a very bitter succession battle in the MDC. Just give us, outline the players and the possible outcome of that.
Well, you have Nelson Chamisa, who's 40 years old, could be the face of a new generation.
Yeah.
He very quickly got the National Executive Council together, or at least most of them, and said, okay, I'm acting president now for the next year. There are two other vice presidents. It was kind of odd when Morgan Tsvangirai knew he was ill. He selected two more acting vice presidents in addition to the vice president who had been elected. The vice president.
So he never backed Nelson Chamisa. Is that what you're basically saying?
It's hard to say. The elected vice president is Thokozani Kupe. Okay. Then when Morgan Tsvangirai knew he was sick, I mean colon cancer is very sick, he appointed two acting vice presidents, Nelson Chamisa and Elias Mudziri. They call him Engineer Mudziri. Used to be the mayor of Harare. So now those three actors are jostling around. And even at today's funeral, there was news coming out saying that Chamisa's supporters made it impossible for Thokozani Kupe and another guy, Douglas Mwanzora, who maybe you've seen in that film, The Democrats, who might be coming up. He's the Secretary General of the party. I was told from Zimbabwe that that was untrue news. And today on the news, they were suggesting that perhaps those youngsters were making it difficult for Mnangagwa to make a speech. So we don't know. We've heard some indications that there will be a Congress, an elective Congress coming up in March. If Nelson Chamisa allows that to happen, I think he's doing a good thing, because then he's saying, you know, this is a democratic process. He's very popular among the people. He's a preacher. He's a good speaker. He's a good dancer. He's faced some criticism in the MDC for not organizing the party very well in 2013, not getting people registered, in being a bit fast and loose with the structures, which was indicated in the way he very quickly, you know, declared himself acting president with the help of the National Executive Council. So yes.
Basically, because the MDC has split before as well, basically they have to get their act together and stand united if there's any chance against ZANU-PF in the next election.
Yes, and in the last few months, there's this alliance which is bringing back some of the parties which split off, varying from 2005 until 2013, 2014, bring them back together. Those are some of the old leaders of the MDC. Welshman Nube, Tendai Biti has got the People's Democratic Party, Jacob Mapfume, who's got another party. If they can, and there's a few others, if they can come back and forge a new united front, which could perhaps be a new party in time. In the meantime, they've got to decide, okay, maybe you won't run in this constituency, because this is a single-member party constituency, not like here where it's a list. So you're running in one region. So you and I'm with one party, you're with another party. You say, okay, you can have it. I'll withdraw from the election. That's a real tough decision to make, right? Those are the decisions that are going to have to be made. Plus, can that leadership just come together again and find perhaps a new vision? Because it's kind of interesting. Mnangagwa has taken up much of the sort of socioeconomic discourse that the MDC has been associated with since they lost their trade union roots. Private property, farming rights for compensation for the old white farmers, that sort of thing. Can they find something a little bit that sounds more like social justice than the ZANU-PF? Can they find a different ideology, a different mission? What are the new social forces in Zimbabwe that have been you know, the informal sector, 90% of the economy is almost an informal, whereas the MDC grew up with a strong trade union base because it grew out of the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions, which was the equivalent to COSATU here. They've lost that because there's deindustrialization. So what are the new social forces that can sort of get behind a new vision?
can they draw on the oppression of the past? ZANU-PF, the ruling party under Mugabe, was the oppressor. Tsvangirai seeing the change, but ZANU-PF still there. And people are talking about a second liberation for Africa. So maybe, I don't know, railing around their course.
Could be, although Mnangagwa has opened up a reconciliation commission to redress the problems that, the Gukuruhundi massacres. And I'd say yes, but the MDC will also have to clean up its own act to exemplify a new vision, a new liberation. Otherwise, ZANU-PF might just grab it and run with it.
Fascinating. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Professor David Moore from UJ.